Hello, it's the Dr. Baker and all my fellow students at UNT. This is Judge Christian. Here is my hopefully 10-minute video going over kind of what my proposal is going to be and why I want to do it. So I'm going to kind of go through the what, why, how, and when, and some of the implications of why I want to do my study. I'm not going to follow along with the different review processes or the PowerPoint or anything. I'm just going to kind of do it a little bit differently. So the what part is basically I just want to talk about what the title of my research is. It's called Bees Over Water, an Experimental Approach to Beekeeping. I'm a beekeeper, and there's a lot of beekeeping challenges in the world. And I wanted to I've had this idea for quite a long time of a different approach to beekeeping that might help bees, and it'd be pretty simple for the beekeeper to run this program that I'm about to explain. So we'll see. I'm very curious to see what the results would be. So I'm kind of doing this for selfish reasons, and I'll get into a little more of that as well. As a beekeeper, there's a lot of challenges to beekeeping in this day and age. And I'll go through some specifics because when I explain to you, the title is Bees Over Water. Like, well, why would bees over water do anything? Well, I'll get into some of that. So there are two main predators or pests in the beekeeping world today, and they're called small hive beetle and varroa mites. And these are not natural to, or they're not native to North America. Small hive beetle came from South Africa, and the bees there do fine with them, but the bees we have here do not do well with them at all. The other pest is varroa mites. They came from Asia. And again, the Asian bees do fine with them, but the bees that produce honey here in America are European descent. They do not do well with them at all. So as a beekeeper, if we can eliminate these two invasive species, then like 90% of beekeeping is handled for us. Beekeeping becomes a lot easier if we can eliminate varroa mites and small hive beetle. So especially if you're a hobby beekeeper, if you just do this kind of on the side, there's a lot of things going on in a beehive. I hear all the time people say, hey, I've got this problem with wax moths. Well, really, you don't have a wax moth problem. You have a varroa mite problem, and you just don't know it. Because if a beehive's doing what it's supposed to do, the wax moths really aren't a problem. But the way varroa mites and small hive beetles work is they make the colony sick, and they make it more susceptible to having problems like wax moths. And also there's a ton of viruses out there that bees can get. So if we can eliminate these two problem pests, then it solves a lot of our problems. So why does this matter? Why we want to do this? Well, I'm in a Texas A&M Master Beekeeping program, so that's the selfish part. I have to do some independent research through that program as well. So this is the kill two birds with one stone approach. I can do this for the UNT Master's program, and I can do this for a research program with the Texas A&M Master Beekeeper program. So the how. So why would putting bees over water do anything for bees? And I've mentioned this to other people in the past, and they just have that kind of the dog kind of like, why would bees over water do anything? I mean, so they can be closer to water so they can drink more? No, it has nothing to do with that. So let's talk about small hive beetles. Small hive beetles they look like a little, I hate to say they look like a cockroach, but they're a small beetle. They have a hard shell. The bees cannot kill those hive beetles. They can chase them around, but if they sting them, they can't sting through the shell. So the hive beetles infest bee hives or bee colonies, and they eat the wax and they eat honey within the hive. Now, a healthy beehive can usually kind of maintain some balance in there. You can have small hive beetles in a hive, and it's not just the end of the world. I've heard a number of 200, a threshold of 200. As long as you have less than 200 in a hive, you're probably okay. I haven't seen any research that says 200, but just talking to other beekeepers, you're not going to completely eliminate these things so far. So let me explain how a hive beetle's life cycle works. So a female hive beetle will lay thousands. She can lay thousands of eggs in little cracks in the hive. Some of those eggs, or a lot of those eggs, will hatch out and they become larvae, just like they look like little maggots. And they will go through and they bore holes through frame and honeycomb and wax that's in the hive. So the bees have to spend a lot of energy and resources fixing these holes. And also, if they drill through where the honey is, the honey just starts running down, and if you want to see something disgusting, Google small hive beetle slime out. And it's specifically called a slime out. It turns the honey black. It just wipes the whole hive out. So in this process, though, when the larva gets older, it has to pupate in the dirt. So the small hive beetle runs around the hive and eats and consumes food for a couple of weeks, and then it literally crawls out. It has to crawl out. It has to leave the hive, and it tunnels into dirt. Now that dirt can be, right under the hive, or it can be 100 yards away, wherever it's got to go. Well, my system is if I put a hive over a pool of water, then the larva will die. It'll drown before it can get to the ground. It has no way to get to the ground. So in theory, then, you'll have one generation of these hive beetles, but when they leave to go pupate, they won't come back as adults. So you should be able to knock them out. Varroa mites, similar, they have a very poor sense of smell. And no, they have an excellent sense of smell. They have a very poor sense of sight. So they attach themselves to bees, and they actually suck the blood out of the bees. But on occasion, they will fall off a bee. So what you do there is you have a bottom board on a colony, and that bottom board will have a screen, and the hive beetle will fall through the screen. And if it hit the ground, it would probably could smell its way back into the hive. But if there's a pool of water, it'll hit that water, and it'll die, and it'll drown. So it can't make its way back in. It's not unusual for varroa mites to fall off of adult bees. So there's ways to do the counting the populations on this. In the hive beetles, I want to count them by using dryer sheets, which is ironic. Dryer sheets, I'm talking just the dryer sheets you put in your dryer. They need to be unscented, so you get the ones that are for people who have sensitivities, allergies, and so forth, because you don't want any kind of scent, because that'll kind of freak the bees out. Hive beetles have hooks on their feet, and when they walk across this dryer material or like a microfiber, they get hung up in it, and they're stuck there. So that's one way to capture them. That's some of the instrumentation I'll use to capture hive beetles, and I'll be able to count. The other method would be they actually make hive traps that have vegetable oil. They're very sensitive to vegetable oil. They can smell the vegetable oil, and they'll come and they crawl in, and then they drown in vegetable oil. This doesn't bother the bees one bit. On varroa mites, excuse me, on varroa mites, the best way to count them is you have to kill a bunch of bees, but you capture 300 bees, and it's a long process, but you basically capture 300 nurse bees, and there's a specific way to find out what a nurse bee is. You put them in a cup that has an inner and an outer screen, and you drown them in alcohol, which a lot of beekeepers don't like to kill their bees, but 300 bees is very minor in the big picture. And that alcohol solution, it kills the bees, but it also kills the mites. And so you'll have, in that bottom portion of your container, you have a little screen that the mites can fall through, but the bees cannot. And within that number, you're looking for a 2% threshold. So if I have 300 bees, which there's a way to measure that, believe it or not, you don't count them, it's just a volumetric measurement. 300 bees in my top portion that I've killed, I should have no more than 6 mites. If I have more than 6 mites, then I'm at the threshold level and I need to intervene. So I'm going to have 2 sets of hives. I'm going to have two hives over basically a horse trough full of water, which I have, and then that'll be my experimental hives. And these are the numbers I'll be counting to see if the water is changing the numbers over my control hives, which will be set on ground traditionally, that the hive beetles and the varroa mites can come and go as they normally do. So I'm going to be comparing the different numbers between these different populations based on location, whether they're over water or not over water. The threat to validity might be, well, what if I get in some hive beetles or varroa mites from other colonies or wild? I've seen some numbers on that. I've got to be careful of that. Also, this keeps out fire ants and mice as well. They're not going to swim across water typically. You don't have a ton of problems with mice. I've had some problems with fire ants in the past, but a pool of water should eliminate that as well. The timeline on this, the wind, I'd really like to run this probably multiple times in multiple locations. I know just for this experiment we're doing it one time for probably about a 6 to 8 month time period, but I'd want to see this in different environments, different places. It'd be interesting to see. Some of the implications for this, if you're a hobby beekeeper, maybe you don't need to understand or want to understand all this highly technical about this pupal larva rate and infestation, and whether they're in the ground, out of the ground, whether I have to do this testing for varroa mites. You don't want to kill your bees. You just need to know that if I put bees over water, it helps my bees. So I think for the hobbyist, that would be something that could be of interest to them. Also, maybe commercial. I know there's some beekeepers in like Mississippi that put bees over in the swamps and so forth. So that they're kind of doing this. I don't know if they've done any measuring, and I've just heard this through the grapevine. I haven't found any studies that recommend or capture any of this information. So, but anyway, so that's basically what I'm doing is I'm putting beehives over water to see if it affects the population of the different infestations, specifically small hive beetle and varroa mite. So I hope that makes this a little clearer. Thank you. Bye.